So, first things first, we want to talk about body awareness and power generation. So, I'm going to ask you guys to put the inside edges of your feet together. And I want you to think about the idea that your head, your shoulders, and your hips are on one straight line, and that line is perpendicular to the floor. So, what happens is when I get out of this structure, a lot of bad things happen. I can fall forward. I'm also unevenly weighting my feet. So, like a lot of people do Western boxing, and I like Western boxing as far as getting people to move around, getting people to throw their hands and stuff. But a lot of Western boxing is front leg weighting. For what we do, martial arts wise, self-defense wise, MMA wise, Muay Thai wise, any way you want to think about it, that's a bad thing. Generally also, once you get your head past your shoulders and your hips, you can be kneed, you can be snapped down, you can be snapped down into neck cranks, you can be snapped down into chokes, you can be hit on the back of the head. So we want to have that, what we call this in sort of my default mode is Cantonese, because most of my primary teacher was Cantonese, so we call this Sun Fa, which is body method, literally method of blood sometimes. So again, head, shoulders, and hips, so we want to be up. A good way to sort of get an idea also about the width, we don't have real wide stances in my traditional system. Bend your knees a little bit just to take the pressure off of you and step out to about shoulders width. Now, when we take a fighting stance, right, I have one foot in front of the other, and I do orthodox now, though. Later, if you want, I'll explain the transition from traditional Chinese martial arts, which usually work right side forward, what they call southpaw. But we've transition into orthodox. But people see this stance and they don't realize it's not wider than my shoulder. Okay? So from here though, what we're going to do first, this is your north. Okay, so I'm going to talk also about like a geography lesson. I'm going to talk about north, south, east, and west a lot. So I'm warning you in advance. Some of you know this already. The easiest way to begin to talk about power generation with my beginner classes before I go into theory, I just talk about hips and shoulders. Hips and shoulders. You guys can follow along with me. Hips and shoulders. Hips and shoulders. So again, my head, my shoulders, and my hips are up. I'm about shoulder width apart, and I'm going to turn my hips and shoulders. Turn my hips and shoulders. So I'm keeping that Sun Fa, which is the body method, meaning I'm keeping myself erect. I'm turning hips and shoulders. Turning with both my hips and shoulders is what we call U-lick. U-lick meaning the waist force or the waist power. You can start to feel like you're working on some flexibility, like thoracic flexibility, not just turning, but really like driving yourself in. So traditionally, this is what we call side stance. And side stance, again, introduces the Sun Fa, which is the body method, introduces the U-lick, which is the waist power. And then what we start doing is, the concept is what we call cross-body sub-G. And so, again, if you think of this as the north, my feet are east and west. Obviously, I'm punching to the north, one shoulder, and the other shoulder, I want to get to go south, meaning that I'm really turning. In other words, I can sort of do this. This is not a complete turn, but I want to do this. So we'll start first with straight punches. Turn your hips and shoulders and just shoot a punch. And again, I'm not really worried about teaching you a specific technique right now. I'm just trying to get you to learn how to turn so that, a lot of people punch and they arm punch. They don't punch with their whole body. I want to turn my hips and shoulders. Traditionally, this is chun, meaning the penetrating punch or the piercing punch, but it's just a straight punch. And again, you'll notice that as I do this, right, to emphasize this cross-body position, traditionally we extend the arm back. This is not for application. I don't want to be fighting with one hand punching the other hand down, but to teach you how to turn the most into your punches. And again, if you were looking at me from the ceiling down, you would see a cross pattern. This is, what they call sub-G in Cantonese. Figure 10, literally. It's a cross pattern. So again, we use this for what we call, vectors of power generation, or vectors of force generation. And so, of course, obviously, you're going to have your straight punches, pick up and hook, pick up and hook. And we're going to talk about all these punches when we do all the drills. Right? The thing about hook is to always make sure that the elbow and the wrist and the forearm are parallel to the floor. I don't want the elbow down. You can see in different Kung Fu systems, there's fist down, palm down, and palm facing. Also see exactly the same thing in boxing gyms. I grew up in boxing gyms. I can tell you that some gyms will have you do palm down and tell you that's the only correct way, and then the other half of the boxing gyms in the world will do palm facing and tell you that's the only way. So what I can tell you off the bat is that half the boxing gyms in the world are not incorrect. Okay, so you have hooks. And again, I want the elbow up. There's two reasons I want the elbow up. Three reasons. Structurally, fist to wrist, wrist to forearm, forearm to elbow. It's solid. As opposed to something like this, or this, where you can see how you can hurt here. Right? So, structurally, it's powerful. Second, having the elbow behind it as it turns, if you're using that U-lick, is power generation. So it's structurally sound, and you're generating the maximum amount of force by having your elbow up. Third, put your hand up like you're defending your face, right? With my elbow down, you can still block it just by doing this, right? Everybody see what I'm talking about? Don't resist too much, because I might be tempted to hit you, and I don't want to do that. With the elbow up, see the difference? Here, trying to hook somebody with the elbow down. Half the time he's going to block it just by having his hand up, with the elbow up. So 3, the structure itself, right? Those of you that take classes with me know that I make you do push-ups this way, not this way. This is not structurally very good for your wrist. This is straight. It'll never hurt your wrist hitting this way. Knuckles to wrist, wrist to forearm, forearm to elbow, straight, parallel to the floor. Structurally, it's sound. Having the elbow up behind it is so that you get that real U-lick, gets the most power out of it. It's harder to block like this, and that's 3. And I lied because there's actually a 4th reason to do it this way, which is that if you don't hit with the fist, you hit with the elbow. And you learn later on that hooks and elbows are exactly the same tool. Just a little bit of adjustment. It's like that Swiss Army knife, right? You open it up, it's got 12,000 tools in it. Learning how to have this funky chicken motion and up and around. So we had straight punches, we had hooks. Next thing to do is uppercuts. Uppercuts. Okay, traditional styles, you see the pow, which is a long uppercut. That is, again, just basically to try to get you to learn how to do that force generation. There are some applications of pow, like practical applications of pow, but for the most part, pow is to basically get you into the real uppercut, what I consider the real uppercut, which is called Jugang pow, where the Jugang means staring in the mirror, like you have a little compact, a little mirror in your hand, and you'd be staring at it. So again, this hook is this east-west, and Jugang pow is north-south. And because it's Jugang pow, obviously in this one the palm is facing you. You want to be facing as you come up. So again, don't get too hung up on the traditional stuff here right now. Let's just make sure that we're using our hips and shoulders, whether it's straight punches, whether it's hooks, whether it's uppercuts. And then of course, if you have something that's going from the bottom to the top, you have something that comes from the top, bottom, what we call an overhand or cup shoy. The only difference is, traditionally, most cup shoy is this. Sometimes cup shoy was before the cup, meaning this way. You'll get sick and tired of this thing, right? But in other words, uppercut is from the bottom to the top. The traditional overhand is from the top to the bottom, but our traditional overhand is actually from this top to this bottom, or this top to this bottom. And again, it has to do with power, it has to do with how you block. Body method. You know, I never want to be fighting like this. I don't want to be front weighted. Waist power. I'm always turning my hips and shoulders into what I do. Traditionally, I use the side stance to teach that concept. When you're in a fighting stance, hips and shoulders, hips and shoulders. Somebody asked me a really interesting question, which is that we don't jab here, we jab here. And from an internal point of view, like, just sort of stand there as my point of reference. Internal people sometimes are taught that doing this, you're like giving up your back, kind of speaking. You know, like, or you're I forget what the term is they use in internal, but one of the Shingy guys I'm friends with said, I'm doing that and I'm feeling, I go, well, because I'm not turning where I'm ending up here. What I'm doing is I'm turning and staying, Dan can see it immediately, right? You're not getting any closer to me. If you walk in on that, you're going to be walking in on a punch that's going to go an extra 2 or 3 inches. I'm not rotating where I come off the line. I'm controlling, I'm dominating, I'm occupying the center line, which is like basically in simple terms, his tip of his nose to my tip of the nose. And by turning, I'm just extending. That makes sense? As opposed to, which is what people are afraid of. People are afraid of doing that and giving up their back or missing, so they end up doing this. I don't ever want to do that. I want to do this and this. If you look at my traditional system, you know, chun, full extension. Cross body is that concept to get you to turn. I also sometimes call it the bow and arrow concept, right? You can't just put the arrow in the bow and expect the arrow to go. You have to pull it this way and also pull it back this way. So in other words, when I'm jabbing, this one's pulling as much as this one's coming. When I'm crossing, this one's pulling as much as this one's coming. Does that make sense? So these are just concepts for power generation and for body awareness. The body method, stay upright. The waist power, turning. Occupy the center with your punches if they're straight. Waist power, cross body, or the bow and arrow concept.